All right, we'll go ahead and get started. Thank you for being here this afternoon. This panel, it's called Roll Out the Red Carpet, From Hollywood to KidLit Dreams. So we'll be focusing on the connection, relationship, the funness between writing and Hollywood, plays, movies, TV, whatever. All right. So I'm going to start by introducing myself and then telling you who's on this panel and letting them introduce themselves as well. So I'm Virginia Loh-Hagan. I am a children's book writer. I have mid-grade and picture books and a nonfiction imprint stuff that I'm working on. And I like watching a lot of movies and TVs. So I'm really interested in this topic because of that. Okay, so on this panel, we have Leslie Margolis, Dana Middleton, Eric Pierpoint, Scott Sonneborn, and I apologize if I mispronounce your name. If I do, please correct me. And then we have, lastly, but not least, Quinn Sosna-Spear. They're here on this panel because everyone's connected in some way to something Hollywoody, or a play. Because I know that Quinn's work, she does more plays, but let's learn more. So let's start with Dana. Dana, if you could tell us about yourself and your connection to the red carpet.
Okay, hi, I'm Dana Middleton. I am a writer of middle grade books. I've lived in Los Angeles, Hollywood, Los Feliz for about 20-something years. I came to Los Angeles to work in film production and did. I was a producer of a Oscar-nominated short film. That didn't win, but we went to the Oscars. It was pretty fun. That's a pretty red carpet experience right there. And and I write now not only fiction but animated television.
Fun. Okay, so we have Leslie.
I'm Leslie Margolis, the author of a bunch of books. Some of them are right here. And about 4 years ago, 8 years ago, Boys Are Dogs was optioned by some producers who sold it to the Disney Channel, and Disney Channel turned Boys Are Dogs into a Disney Channel movie called Zapped, starring Zendaya. So,
wow, fun. Did you get to meet Zendaya?
No. I kind of wanted, everyone said, this is such a big deal, it's so great, you should visit the set. And I called the producers and said, can I visit the set? And they're like, oh. We're filming in Vancouver. It's really hard to get to. And I was like, really? Because planes go there. I'm like, okay, they don't want me to visit. So I didn't visit. And I never met Zendaya. I hear she's very nice.
Oh, good. Yeah, she does seem nice. I would have asked her about Zac Efron and Hugh Jackman, though. But anyways, Scott, we've got here.
I'm Scott. I am a middle grade author as well as some books for younger readers as well. And but my day job is I work in animation. I'm a writer at Nickelodeon. I'm a head writer of a cartoon that's coming out this fall called Wonder Park. Before that, I was at Disney for a long time working as a head writer on other shows. And then before that, I worked on things like My Little Pony, Octonauts, a bunch of different cartoons for kids, all the way back to my first job was on Beavis and Butthead, which was not for kids. Not for kids.
Do our kids today know what Beavis and Butthead is? Do they remember that? Yeah? No? From Nickelodeon, I remember what's that the show, the Slime Show? That's what I mean. Were you part of that? Oh, okay. Okay, that's right. Yes, that's right. Okay.
And I'm
Quinn?
I'm Quinn, and I also write middle grade. I write fantasy middle grade. My first book's coming out April 2nd. Check it out, The Remarkable Inventions of Walter Mortensen. And I was a California young playwright, had a number of plays produced, and then I went to school for screenwriting at USC. And from there, I ended up becoming a ghostwriter of some mostly feature scripts. Then I started writing video games. So if any of you played DreamWorks VR games, I probably wrote it. And now I actually produce comics. So a wide gamut of visual entertainment.
Great. And then we have Eric.
Hey, I'm Eric Pierpoint. I am a middle grade author. I've written two, The Last Ride of Caleb O'Toole, The Secret Mission of William Tuck. I call them inspirational action-adventure historical fiction. And my claim to Hollywood, or Hollywood's claim on me, began a long time ago. When you tell an actor to keep it short, we don't. I won't talk about myself that long. But I started in classical theater at an MFA. I moved to New York. That was back east. I moved to New York. I fell in love with the business and being on stage. I eventually kept flying out to L.A. to test for various projects. Ended up staying in the 80s, early 80s. And I've done, I don't know, a couple hundred shows over the years, series that I've done. And you can just go on IMDb and check it out and figure out where that is. So I'm working on a third book right now, same age group, and I'm glad to be here and away from it for a little bit because it's chasing me.
So when I looked you up, well, I looked you all up. But when I looked you up, Eric is you're in over, 62 movies and a lot of shows and.
Well, the most popular ones, because I've done some good ones and some really not so good ones. Liar, Liar, everybody knows that one, Jim Carrey movie. Holes, everybody knows that. And the kids.
What you do in Holes?
The evil sheriff was killed by Kate the Kissing Bandit for trying to kiss her, and she shot me. Like, I was hungover, you know.
In the movie or on set?
I was, just today. No, and an Anthony Hopkins movie called The World's Fastest Indian, which is something
great.
he set a motorcycle land speed record. And I've done a bunch of aliens. Alien Nation was my main show. Two cops. I'm the alien cop that had the baby. So that was interesting. And that was written by a female writer, of course, to put me through it.
Great. Well, thank you. All right. So, what are some benefits and challenges of working in the movie and TV world? And also, I'm going to back up a little bit too, and if this helps answer the question, like, how did you get started? How did you get connected into this? And some of you, it sounds like you were writing first and then movies second, or movies first and then writing second. But if you could speak to, how do those two worlds connect, and then what are benefits and challenges of both being a writer and in the red carpet world? So we'll start with Dana again.
Well, I would say the benefit, if you are in the right kind of situation in Hollywood, is more money. Wouldn't you say that, guys? Yeah.
What?
More money. Like, that's where the money is, right? I mean, not always. I did a lot of independent stuff, so it can also not be much money either. But think about it. It's true, right? So that's obviously a benefit. I think it's fun to work with people in film. It's collaborative, and you get to meet different kinds of people. I mean, all kinds of different artists. But I also think the benefit of writing your own fiction is that it's not as collaborative. I mean, even though you get notes from your editor or your agent, that's nothing compared to the notes you'll get in Hollywood. It's pretty much you need to do it a certain way, the way they want you to do it. Whereas I think you have more of a voice in your own fiction.
Great, thank you.
I would agree. I have friends who write for TV, and they're always writing drafts and having meetings, and they're executives who, tell them what to do and change their mind, and it's a lot of rewriting, and I feel like the end product is often not what they thought it would be. I had a friend who had a pilot that I loved, and she sent me the first draft, and it was so great, and then it made it to air, which was a big deal, and it was garbage. And you could kind of see the notes and what people told her to do, and it was kind of a disaster. And I like in fiction writing that it's not glamorous, it's lonely. There's not a lot of money in it for most people, at least in my experience. But you own your words, and my editors have all been smart and amazing, and they always make my book better, and they always have really wonderful things to say about it, and I've learned from them.
So how does one get into writing for TV or movies? Okay, Scott can talk to that. Well, we could also go back to, if you want to answer.
Oh, the other question?
Sure.
Yeah. Sure. I'd love to answer all the questions. Well, I would actually say that, everything that they said is true. I think that in TV, at least in my experience, it is collaborative not because it's collaborative because it just has to be. And it's sort of, you don't have ownership. I think you have to kind of give that up. When you write on somebody else's show, you're trying to get into their head, their vibe, their tone, their voice. You're trying to do something they want to do. It's not yours, and that's not the job. And so you have to kind of just embrace that. And even if, as what they call my job, a story editor, I'm like the head writer, and rewrite people's scripts all the time, not because they're bad, but just because they don't fit what we need to be doing right now at this moment. Things change. I mean, that's just the nature of TV. The plus side, though, is it's much less lonely. It's more fun. You get to have, people around you who, in the best of circumstances, are your friends, and you get to hang out with them all day. And they are really usually very funny people who make you laugh, and and then the pressure's on you to try to make them laugh, and that's not the fun part. But
So what you're telling me is it's like Third Rock to the Sun every day when you go to work?
like 30 Rock? No, no, but I mean, but in the best days it's like that. Yeah, on good days it is like that. And then on bad days it's not like that at all. But in the bad nights it's definitely not like that at night. But I think the pros of I would say of books in my experience too is that it seems to me that and I don't think my editors are here, but time is never of the essence. Like in
we're being filmed.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Just FYI.
But there's definitely, you have a lot more time, it seems like, with a book. And I don't know if, because in TV things are due and there's always people behind you. There's the, again, in animated television, there's the designers, and then there's the storyboard artists and the editors, and then it needs to be shipped overseas to be animated. And you can't be late because then the whole thing breaks down. But with books, it seems like there's always another week if you need another week, which I like, because I always need another week.
Sure. Sure.
And then in terms of I think everybody's experience that I've met who works in film or TV, their way of getting in is always different. There's no way to do it. It's always a different, strange path. But I mean, I think for me, the advice I give people is to try to just be somewhere where you're in a place where if something happens, you can jump in and have the opportunity to do something. So if you can work at a television studio in some other capacity that's not as a writer, and just be around and be meeting people and be talking to people, that's sort of the way that, if you can be a writer's assistant or just some other kind of assistant, some way to kind of to do that. I mean, for me, my path was intertwined a little bit with writing for books, because I worked out of college at DC Comics. I was an assistant editor, not in the comic books area, but I worked in what they called licensed publishing, where we would license Superman and Batman and Wonder Woman to other publishers like Simon & Schuster and Random House, and they would make kids' books with those characters, and we would package those books usually and edit, and I would help edit them and send the books out. And I also, but then I wanted to be a writer, so I worked, doing whatever comic books people didn't want to write, or also Mad Magazine was part of DC Comics then, so I wrote some articles for Mad Magazine that, were funny. I'm supposed to be funny. But then what happened was a friend of mine had an acquaintance of his who was a writer for Beavis and Butthead, and that guy had the chance to write the Beavis and Butthead comic book, and basically I had written a couple comic books, nothing big, but basically traded that experience to that guy for an introduction to the head writer of Beavis and Butthead, and then pitched some ideas and they liked them, and that kind of went on from there. And so it's basically, so to me, and then from there, having written on Beavis and Butthead, it's sort of that got my foot in the door and was able to write for other places. And so, but to me, the lesson I took from that was just I was kind of around people who were doing what I wanted to do. Again, working as an assistant editor in licensed publishing, I wasn't writing comic books, I wasn't writing TV, and I wasn't even really writing books. But eventually then, too, from there is when the people who I met there and the contacts I made there, I was able to write a bunch of middle grade novels with Superman and Batman and The Flash and Green Lantern, and from there, having met those editors, was able to pitch them my own ideas and eventually got my own series. So it's sort of, I think, just being ready, but also just being in the right place around the right kind of people.
Great. So what I heard was we just need to follow Scott around and stalk him, and then we'll eventually meet the right people at the right time, right? Yeah. Okay. So I have his address, by the way, just FYI.
Yeah, well,
Quinn?
For me, I guess you touched on two things that were probably the things that I think I would also say. One being the main difference for me between writing a novel and writing something for film or TV or games or whatever, is that you're not writing your script for yourself. You're writing your script as a blueprint for a team of people. So it's not necessarily something that is meant to be enjoyed in its singular form. It's something that's meant to create something else. So the nice thing about writing a book, although it takes longer and the entire publishing industry takes much longer, is you really get to write it for you, and you get to write it for a reader, and you get to personalize it, and that's special. In terms of getting in the industry, I mean, I think I am I'm an example of somebody who tried to do the right way and I went to school, and I did the internships, and I worked my way up, which it very much is a ladder, the entire entertainment industry. And I sort of discovered that, yeah, it's a lot about who you know, where you are, and you can't necessarily do it the right way. And that, for me, was frustrating. So I think that's something that I gravitated toward books with, is that you can query, and somebody will read it, and they may like it. And if they do, there's always steps, and if you follow those steps, you got a really good shot. So I think that kind of differentiates books and film and TV as well.
Great. Thank you, Eric.
Well, my journey to get into middle grade came from being an actor and putting life to words that they've been writing, right? So getting that script and bringing the flesh and blood to that story that you've written has always been a pleasure and a challenge for me, and ultimately sometimes frustrating, because it is a family, it's a collaboration, it's the best of times and the other stuff, but you get on a set and it's usually family. I know people over the years, generations, decades, where I go, how are your kids? Oh, they're married now? Oh, so your grandfather, But I always feel great. But what happened with me was, as an actor, some years ago, my manager suggested that I had written a couple of screenplays, and they were what I wanted to write, which is what you're saying is a big difference when it is personalized like that. But my manager said something interesting. She said, Hallmark is looking for a Western. Do you have an idea for a Western? Yeah. And then I had to think of one. But I had family, I had diaries from my family pioneer history, and I kind of got to noodling around, and so I wrote it, and Hallmark was going to shoot it, and they stopped doing their movies of the week, so the option came back to me, and I'm like, well, I could maybe turn this into a novel. My manager was trying to get me to do that, and I said, no, that's too much work, right? But I wrote 50 pages, and she gave it to a lit agent that she knew, and she rejected it. And I'm an actor. I've been rejected so many times in my life, and I've had my successes, but I said, I can take direction. So the whole process that's another question probably, but what's interesting about the fact that it eventually worked after all the rewriting and all the going through the agent and getting the publisher and rewrites with the publisher, and I got a book deal, that I was so encouraged. But to be able to sit down and write what you want to write, that you feel passionate about what you're writing, it takes me back to the passion I felt as an actor, too. So I couldn't give anybody advice about other than just getting to it and starting out. I teach at the University of Redlands every other year, a film class for the drama kids. I tell them that they have the power in their hands right now. They can write, shoot, direct, produce, edit their own content. And a lot of great original stuff is being created. So I didn't have that really when I was just starting out. So I said, well, don't just limit yourself. Let's get at it with what do you want to, what's in your heart, what's in your head, what do you want to try? Just try something. So, and they come up with some pretty good stuff sometimes. But there's no real clear linear path. And as I tell young students about trying to become a professional actor, well, you better be ready when your break comes, or at least your second or third break, because after that, it may run dry, and that's kind of how it happened with me. But I don't know, did I answer that question?
Sure.
No? Okay.
So we'll go back to Dana, and then I'm going to ask you, what tips do you have for folks who are interested in pursuing writing and, your red carpet connection?
I would say write, because it all kind of goes together. I did not think this would ever be possible for me to write a book. You know, because I just didn't, I thought, oh, well, I'm not a real writer. I wrote screenplays on the side and, you know, did things that I didn't really show people for a long time. But then something amazing happened. I had a writing partner, and it was so much fun because we had so much fun together. And we wrote a kid's book. It was a big Christmas adventure, screenplay, a big screenplay. And it was a blast, and we had, you know, we got adoption, and there's some good things happened with it. Never got made, but it was a wonderful experience. And during that experience, a light bulb went off for me, saying, oh, kids, you know, this is, I like this. This is what I want to do. And then it led to writing my first book. So I think my advice is just, if you want to write, write. Because storytelling is storytelling. It's just, you know, maybe in a different, you know, what do you call it? A different package format. Thank you. That's it. Yeah.
So could I assume that when you're talking about folks who, advising folks who, for example, want to get into writing for TV or writing for movies, same type of thing, just write?
I mean, you have to be prepared, just like they were saying over here. You have to be prepared. If you want to be a writer and you don't have a sample, or you don't have something to show someone, that's a problem, you know, because you'll have that, because you know what, you'll have an opportunity. It happens. So you want to be ready for that opportunity. I think that is actually really important. Yeah.
And what I also heard too from all of you speaking is this. It's kind of interesting because when you're writing as a writer in the book industry, you can kind of take your time, right? But it sounds like, from based on what you're saying, in terms of writing for TV or movies, there's no time. You're on a schedule and you got to roll it out and just get it done. So that's a big difference in terms of the two industries. Leslie, would you like to add to that? Or not to that, but to the question of what tips do you have, or what advice do you have for folks who are interested in doing both?
Doing both.
Either or. You can talk about the book industry or
I'll talk about
getting
books.
into-
I mean, I spent my life loving books and always wanted to be a writer. I did not know how, and similar to Scott, I moved to New York after college and worked in publishing because I thought, well, I don't know how to be a writer, but I'll meet writers if I work at a publishing house and figure out how it's done and what people do. And I wanted to write serious literary fiction and ended up in the license department at Golden Books. And the first book, we had a writer who was hired to write a Barbie book, and he got very mad at the rewrites and refused to rewrite it. So they needed a Barbie book crashed overnight in 24 hours. And I said, I'll do it. And I hate Barbie. But suddenly, you know, for that 24 hours, I came to love Barbie and appreciate Barbie. And I wrote the Barbie book.
Good save.
And then I wrote some
Bratz,
Bratz books, which were even worse than the Barbie books. But I did it. And wrote some Spider-Man and Men in Black, and ended up writing movie novelizations. And this was all, you know, not what I wanted to be writing, but I was writing, and I learned a lot, and I got the opportunity to ghostwrite Nancy Drew and Hardy Boys, which was amazing, and I learned a lot and wanted my own mystery series and learned how to do it, and then came out with Maggie Brooklyn. And all the while I was writing the stuff I didn't want to write, but I was writing, and I think that definitely led to writing what I wanted to write. And in terms of film, I think the Boys Are Dogs experience was really fun, but I really wasn't a big part of it. And there's also something about just like putting yourself in the right place. So for instance, I had this Maggie Brooklyn book. I was at the playground with my kids, and there was like a birthday party going on like 20 feet away, and my 4-year-old wandered over because she saw cupcakes and got a cupcake, and the mom of this child who was, you know, turning 5 or whatever, was a producer, and we started talking, and she really loved Maggie Brooklyn and optioned it. And yeah, nothing happened with that, but now she's an executive at Disney, and just last week we met about Ghosted, and she loved it, and her daughter's 11 now, Coco, loved it, and she said, oh, we'll option it, we'll get writers, and I said, oh, wait, actually, like, I want to write it,
So what we've learned is we need to go to Leslie's kids' birthday parties and hang out there.
Not even. My daughter was crashing this birthday party, just there for the cupcakes, but, you know, so.
Great.
I guess I owe her some money if anything ever happens to that.
Hey, Scott.
Wait, did she let you write it? Are you going to get to write it, or?
For free.
Okay.
I mean, yeah, I think I'm going to try to write it for the first time.
Oh, good. Okay.
But, yeah.
Well, I feel like, did I know you from then in New York at Golden Books, or when was that?
Wait, that was 97 to 99.
Yeah, I definitely did. Yeah, I definitely did know you then. Okay.
That's so funny.
Yeah.
Reunited here
We could talk
at
about that
CSLA.
later. I would say my advice for people is just to, one thing for me anyway was to just know that it's okay to believe that you can get better. Like, I think a lot of people start off and they write something and they're like, oh, I guess I'm not a great writer. But of course you're not a great writer. And of course the first thing you write is not that good. And to believe that, like, maybe it will take 10 years or 20 years to be better. And so on the publishing side, like Leslie was saying, I mean, that was the path I took too, the same path exactly. And the first book I wrote was called Enter the World of Woodland Animals, and it was a sticker book for kids about woodland animals. And I went to the library and researched the animals and wrote up the book, and it was for Reader's Digest kids. And for the kids out there, Reader's Digest was a magazine they used to have back in the last century. But that was not what I thought I would be doing. But I didn't do a very good job with that book, honestly. It was too long, and I could have done much better now with it. And I think giving yourself the chance to believe that there's something, you can be a better version of yourself later on, and that you don't have to sit down the first day and be, the author that you had in your head. And the same thing is true with television. I mean, the way it works in television is you have to have a spec script, a sample, to show people that you can do this. And there's no reason to think, even though you've watched a million TV shows, that the first time you sit down to write one of those, it's going to be good. You need to write 20 of them for it to be good. And then you need to work on a show that's not very good, or you don't do a very good job at, and keep getting better. I mean, and I think that a lot of people, I think, who have the interest in doing this stuff, I think, don't give themselves enough credit to think that maybe I'm not that good at it now, but I could get better. I mean, because even if you went to school for these things, it still takes a lot of time after that to really hone it. And I just think people should give themselves a break and a chance to kind of grow into it, and not give up if you think you're not that great the first day you try it.
Right. And I think Anne Lamott said, right? And I'm paraphrasing here because I know I'm being filmed. If I wasn't being filmed, I would use the word. But, write a crappy first draft. Just get it out there.
Say something real quick about that. That changed my life, reading that chapter.
Bird by Bird?
Yeah. Because I really thought I have to be perfect, and that is really not how it goes.
And you did a mic drop there, so. Quinn?
Yeah, I mean, I would say for me, at least for books, I think it's a lot more straightforward. I think Google is a beautiful, magical wizard, and anybody can write. I know that some people have more fortunate circumstances where it's easier to be able to write, and you have that opportunity. But and for others, it's going to be harder, and you have to make the opportunity, and that's difficult. But everyone has the capacity if they want to, I think, is the thing that I've at least realized upon meeting everybody who has written.
So Quinn, just a second though, because you're in a different space than the rest of us, because you mainly focus on play, stage.
I have, yeah.
Right, okay. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. I mean, I think for playwriting, it's a wonderful thing that, if you get to watch and read a lot of plays, that's a very good way to begin. You don't necessarily need the same structure for playwriting that you need for film and TV or for books even. So you can write really whatever you want. I think that's the ultra extreme of personalization. And you find some friends or you find a director who likes it and you put it up. And I think it's just a matter of just doing it. I think you just have to write it and you just have to put it up and you just have to find your team and that's it. I think plays are probably the easiest if that's something you want to go for. I highly recommend it.
Great, thank you. Eric?
And I've done some of those plays. Original plays where you go, okay, let's give this one a shot. It's kind of cool. You just don't know. And I took an original play to New York, and we ran it off Broadway for 6 months. And it wouldn't have happened if I hadn't put my hand in there. So there was the horrible Super Bowl the other day. An old friend, and I'm like the actor that goes into to the party, the same nerd party that takes place every year. But he always asks me about television and movies and whatever, and he always wants to know, and he says, I have this great idea. It's me when I was younger and in shape, and I'm putting my running shoes on, and I've got Led Zeppelin playing in my ear, and I go off running. And I said, and then what happens? Well, I hadn't really gone past that, right? So that he's stuck in this image of, he's got this thing. Well, fear, to me, my answer to him was okay, film that, but as you are now. I can do it we can do this. Get your iPhone. We'll just do it right now. We'll lay in some music, and we'll edit it, and we'll do that. No. So fear, I think, is one of the biggest things. It got me when I was a young actor. I kept staring at myself in the mirror, telling myself to believe, believe, believe. As a writer, I kind of had so much experience with screenplays because I'd been doing so many over the years. So structure, I had kind of like it's built into me, character development, how to put these characters into a real space, how to breathe life into it of the written word. And I'm sure as a playwright that when you see something magical that happens coming out of these actors' mouths that you've written, it's pretty exciting. Totally, yeah. Like, so I feel like if you can get past that and just get going, and as you say, you improve. You're like my first draft of my first screenplay that is in a drawer someplace was a bloated piece of junk. But the next one was better. The next one was better. And then, as we were saying on the other side, if you've got sample, then they're actually going to be able to read that and then see whether you've got you've got something. And that's kind of what happened to me, because as an actor, I just started writing screenplays, and I had samples. And one thing led to another, and then I ended up with a book deal somehow years later from just trying to keep it going. So just being able to see the big picture, and instead of thinking that you should take your money and buy a coffee shop instead of write, like I had actors, friends of mine, who as they were going further along in their careers, what's Eric doing? He's writing again. What's he doing that for? It's like, we're actors. You go, what? Yeah, okay, but we can do other stuff, right? So if I hadn't tried, it wouldn't have happened. And then you can travel, go from one space to the other. You can be an actor, you can be a writer, you can go back and forth. So I think just the attempt and the passion and the discipline. I've never been under the gun except trying to get a deadline for a novel. I've never written for a television show, but I know how pressure-packed that is. I know when they're waiting for pages. I know that my writer friends are all freaking out half the time, but they love the business. Anyway, that's all I have to say about that right
Great,
now.
Thank you. So I've got 2 questions before I'm going to open up for Q&A. For those of you that are online, there are about 100,000 people in the room right now. So we're packed, standing room only. So I'll ask these 2 questions and then open up for Q&A from the crowd. So my first question is, if you could write any book or movie, what would it have been? Like if you could choose, like Holes, like for example. Is that, how I feel like I watch movies or I watch shows or I read books and I'm like, oh my God, I wish I wrote that one. Like for me, it'd be Game of Thrones. Why didn't I write that one? So what are some ideas? If you could have written anything, what would have been? Oh, Dana says start over there. So I'll start. So
Well, the
go
one
ahead.
I'm not going to say Game of Thrones, although I would like to be in it.
Who would you be?
I don't know, some guy that doesn't get killed in one episode.
I feel like you'd be Lord Commander of the Wall.
Okay, I want a wolf.
Oh, you want to be a Stark.
I just want like a wolf to be my friend. I kind of always liked Eastwood's movie Unforgiven, so it would be hard to make that now because it unrolls. It's slow in a different way. It's not like something that just happening all the time. You have to wait for it. I don't know why I said that, but it just popped into my mind. But The Last Ride of Caleb O'Toole is a Western that starts in the middle of Kansas and ends up in Montana. And I would love for that one to get on the screen. And I'd written myself two roles that I could be in. But that would be, I guess, a good choice for me.
Unforgiven, great. Quinn, what about you? What would you have wished that you wrote?
I mean, Romeo and Juliet. That would have been great. But I mean, more realistically, I think my aesthetic is very like Big Fish. So if I could have written that, that would be awesome. So I love Lucy, Columbo. I'll take anything really.
Great. Scott, what about you?
I don't know. I mean, I like a lot of things. I don't really let myself ask that question because, like for example, with Game of Thrones, I love Game of Thrones, but I do have a friend who works on that show, and if I wished I had written it, I couldn't hang out with that person anymore. I would be so jealous of them. And I have really good friends who have written some amazing things. Like this one of my best friends from college and her husband, they do, she wrote for Mad Men and he does BoJack Horseman. And if I thought about it like that, I would never hang out with them because I would just be consumed with rage and envy the whole time. So I just don't answer that question.
Okay, wait. So your friend that does Game of Thrones, does he tell you stuff? Because I have questions about
No,
what's
I don't
coming
know.
up.
No.
Leslie?
I think Harriet the Spy is the perfect novel,
my gosh,
and
yes.
Louise Fitu has died, but I'm jealous of her and that book, and I would like to write a book that can be that important
Yeah.
30 years later,
Oh, yeah.
however many years, I don't know. But
It's a good choice.
yes.
Dana?
Okay, thanks for letting me be last. Well, one reason that I came to Hollywood is because I love old movies, and that was so much of my growing up. I don't know. I don't know why. I don't know why that's what I did. But so something like It Happened One Night. You know what I mean? Like a real old, riskin', wonderful screwball comedy or something. But also Harry Potter.
Oh. Right.
Yeah, we forgot about that, didn't we? As I said, that's why I came in last. Yeah. I mean, can you just imagine?
Oh, I know.
Imagine. I mean, how amazing that whole story is, and how amazing those stories are.
Well, and the world. I think that's what I
Yeah.
enjoy about the Harry Potters and the Game of Thrones is the whole world.
The world's
that you're
building is
creating.
amazing.
Right. Great. Okay, so my last question before we go into the Q&A is, and we already know that Scott is a tight volt, but my question is, can you give us some gossip about some celebrities? Anybody? What do you know? I'm not serious. Oh, you got a serious response?
I work in animation. We don't have celebrities. But that's yeah.
Story, but if I say it, and
We're being filmed, so yeah. No worries. We'll wait for your tell-all novel when that comes out.
privately, without being taped.
Without names? Oh, I think we are being taped. All right. So, any questions from the crowd? From the 100,000 people that have to hold back? Just hold back. Just wait. Anybody have a question? Yes. Kayla.
So my question is, obviously the money would be a great incentive if it happens, but have you ever been approached to adapt one of your properties and you actually don't think you want it to be something else? Like if you've written a book and they say, we want to make a movie. Have you ever said, no, the platform is the book. Like I don't want to tell the story way. Have you ever had a gut instinct on one of your properties like that? Or has it always been like, yes, I'm open to it?
Well, Maggie Brooklyn was optioned twice, and I was involved in the process, and I didn't really like what people were bringing to it, and I felt very protective of Maggie, and I mean, most things don't go anywhere anyway, but I feel like that may be one reason, and I just like it as a book and don't want it to be anything else and other people involved. So.
My husband's a screenwriter, and I learned some really important things from him before I got into being a writer, which is it doesn't matter what happens in Hollywood. Meaning, that's where you get your retirement, make some money, do a thing, and know it's going to be different. No, it's not going to be exactly what you want. And if it has to be what you've got to be, what you want, I mean, if you have to have that control, then it's probably not a good place. But if you don't, then I think it's a great place.
Eric, you had a comment?
Yeah, I have there's an actor who wants to do the original screenplay that led to The Last Ride of Caleb O'Toole, and the title of that was called Bitterroot. And it was written from an adult point of view, and that's why he wants to do that. And I'm struggling now with, well, okay, there's that, but then there's the book. And really what I want is the book to, to have a film made, that's true to the book, but this has so many similar aspects, and the names of the characters are the same, so I'm kind of like trying to figure this out, making sure that legally I've got everything tied up correctly. But I would think that, like any project that you're doing, you run the risk of things not being exactly like you think they're going to be. Like if you're writing a movie or a screenplay or a play, then you're also depending upon the director and the actors and kind of production, to come up with what you hope is your vision. And I'm sure it's kind of nerve-wracking. And I haven't had any of my own work as a writer done yet, but it's going to be hard for me. Maybe I'll be on the set every day making people nervous. Like, that's not how I saw that character, and I would imagine I would just have to just sit in my trailer, But I'm looking forward to it.
You have a trailer.
I mean, and I hope it's not a honey wagon, which, you know about those, right?
No, I don't know.
It's like actor purgatory.
Oh.
No, if you have a hunt, it's all about trailers.
Okay, great. I would imagine, too, with that, Kayla, that's an interesting question, because it makes me think about the picture book writing process. Because in a way, you're also, as a picture book writer, you have, you write the words. But then, the visuals, the illustrations, a whole nother level of interpretation. And when you sell your book to the publisher, a picture book, you are selling the whole thing. So you don't really have access to, like, who your illustrator is, and you don't make those decisions. The publishing house does. I mean, you can always give suggestions, but it's really, the publishing house. And then you have to, and they don't want the author and illustrator to talk. So you have that experience where you kind of have to give it up, like, to let it go. Like, this was my story, but it's also half the illustrator's story that's being told, and you kind of have to trust, and you trust the house that buys it, that they see the vision for it, and they'll champion your book. And so far, I've been very lucky. That's right. I love you, Sleeping Bear Press. So then you have these great illustrators that envision your book, and they put it in that way, and you just kind of let it go. And then I imagine too, because it's a different format, like when you go to TV or movie, you can't do, you have to cut scenes, you have to do all that. So I imagine when you are open to that, then you just need to kind of let it go. But it would be interesting, that experience of having to let go. Any other questions? Oh, Scott, did you have a comment that you want to make about that? Okay. I saw you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I've only had one thing of mine optioned, and I was, so I was desperate to, push that forward any way I could. But I mean, the way that and I've been involved, and we haven't sold it. It got optioned, but then they need to, it hasn't been made. But I've been involved in that, and the way I've looked at it is sort of just, it's changed so much from what the book is to become a TV show, just because the books took place all over the world, and the TV show has to take place in one town, and things like that obviously radically changed what happened page by page. But in my mind, I just sort of kind of made sure there was like sort of a core at the heart of what the book was about, and who the main character was. That those are the things I kind of tried to hold on to, and sort of, to me, like I sort of look at it more like having to sort of look at like what's the core and like what's the periphery, and like what's the core of what you have that can't change without breaking it, and what's a peripheral, and if it's like this shirt is blue or this shirt's red, doesn't really matter, and those kinds of things. But that's like a whole other way of looking at it, and it really does mean letting go of most of it and just sort of holding on to the essence that probably can be described in like 3 or 4 sentences of what it was all about. So that's the way that I looked at it.
Great. Any other questions? Michael?
What's your process for developing okay, so it's is it character first or plot first for you, and then what's your process for developing
So are you speaking more towards the book industry end or the movie, TV? Okay.
In terms of like, where do you, is character development your thing as a writer, or is plot your thing as a writer, and where do you start and what's your process?
Quinn?
Oh yeah, this one I know. So yeah, when I first started writing plays, I was very familiar with plays, and I would be sitting in class and I would hear voices in my head, and so it would always be snippets of dialogue, and you'd get home as fast as you could, or you'd go to class and you'd write them down as quickly as you could, and so it started out as dialogue. But I've noticed that with books, it always starts to say I see a scene, or I visualize some specific moment in the story that I think is really cool, and I end up writing the story around that. And 100% of the time, that scene has never made it into the final script or book, but it's always about one scene, and it's not really the character or the plot so much as I'm like, yeah, that's cool. I like that.
So the scene for you has something that you want to capture. Maybe it's a tone or a feeling.
Yeah, exactly. It's just like something that gets your blood racing, and you're like, that's cool. That's it. I can do something with that.
Great. Dana?
Character, for sure. Like that idea of that person who somehow just drops in, and hopefully he or she drops in with a hook for me. Like, okay, this person, and this happened, that kind of thing. But it always, for me, it seems to come out of character. Who is this person? What do they want? And how just that person appears. It's kind of magical that way, and that makes it so much fun.
What about Eric or Scott?
I'll speak to the Secret Mission of William Tuck. After I wrote the first book, and that was an amazing process. It started from an idea of a Western, and then I thought of it. But the Secret Mission was an interesting exercise because I thought, what if? What if a boy? And it starts to work on me, and then the boy becomes alive, and this boy, and it's almost like the plot starts to happen. It's kind of like they birth each other almost at the same time with me for some reason. That if a boy has to get a secret message all the way to George Washington, why? What happens? And then who is he? And then I start, as an actor, when I'm writing, I am all the characters, as we all are anyway, writers, but as an actor, I feel like I have to play everybody, no matter how small, and make it as real and authentic as I can. And what are they doing there? But there's sort of an overall idea, and like if a boy if this happens, or a girl, this happens, and then I start to flesh everything out, and it's like a really kind of you can just see all the cells and the bones and the skin and the hair working as going along on this, and eventually leaving myself open to improvisation as I learn more things along the way. But so plot and structure kind of like, to me, they sort of stimulate each other in a way. So I just start to kind of imagine everything that's going on, and it expands and it expands and it expands. And then a year later, I'm done with the first draft, and then I change stuff.
Great. Thank you. Leslie?
I would say every book is different, but I'm very aware that I don't want to bore kids, and that's my biggest fear. So character is very important, plot's very important. With Maggie Brooklyn, I was living in a high-rise in Brooklyn, and I saw someone had left a notice on the bulletin board, like a 10-year-old girl in the building, and said, "I'll solve mysteries for $1. Did you lose your keys?" And the series started with that note.
What wow, that's so great.
So. She read drafts of it and gave me notes. Yeah. She's graduating from college now.
It's like your own little Harriet the Spy over there. Oh, cute. Top that, Scott.
Thanks. Sure. This is not the same, answer the same question, but as I've gotten older, although I'm still not old enough to have written on a show in the 80s, I was still sort of a kid then, but I was always, I've always been sort of consumed with, sort of thinking about like what's a super cool idea for a book, like, and that's basically plot, like what's the hook, what's the story, and being really envious of friends who have all these great nifty ideas for screenplays and stories. But then as I've gotten older and sort of seen more things myself and just been around things more, I've come to realize that the idea, while important, is nothing compared to the execution, which is to say the character, the tone, the vibe, the thing that you bring to it that no one can. And really, like, one of the things about working like at Disney or Nickelodeon is you just see that like I was in development for 2 years on my own project in house at Disney, and you just see that like every year they get 1,000 pitches, and there's like 100 pitches that involve pretty similar ideas, and it's not the idea that sells, it's the take on it, it's the tone, the vibe, and the character, this special sauce that only that one person can bring. And so as I've got, and so to me that's the hardest part, and that's sort of I think what is the biggest thing, is having a character that people can fall in love with, and then the rest will usually fall into place. Thank you. Did I top it?
You did a great job, Scott. Great job. Okay, does anyone have any other questions?
I have a question for Quinn. I once heard Libba Bray, who's a YA novelist. I guess she started off as a playwright, and she was just saying it was so hard, spent years, she made so little money. And then I've just read some other things just about how hard it is. I was just wondering if you feel the same way.
Yeah, I mean, so I wrote plays originally as a teenager, and then California Young Playwright, and then I had multiple plays. And I remember I was going to go to school for playwriting. I had applied and gotten into UCLA as a playwright, and I sat down and talked with one of the directors I'd been working with at one of the theaters, and he very seriously was like, "You're an amazing playwright, and we love you, but do you have any interest in making money at any point in your life?" And I was like, "Yes." And he said, "Then do not go to UCLA." And I said, "Okay." And I had also applied to USC as a screenwriter. And, I don't know that screenwriters are the level of money that anybody, I'm not sure that degree is very helpful either, but it was slightly better than playwriting is what I'd say. So I think in any form of art, most people are not going to be making enough to get by just on their art, but no one who's a playwright, except for maybe 2 people in the country, are making enough to really get by alone on their playwriting. But it's fun. People should still do it just for fun.
Well, and I think a lot of the writers, I assume here too at CSLA and other just kid writers in general, we have day jobs. Most of us have day jobs, unless you're J.K. Rowling, and then that's a whole nother level. But yeah. Any other questions from the crowd? Don't all get up at once. I've got to wait. Okay, go ahead. Jerry?
Do you ever, when you're writing a book, do you ever feel like you're thinking ahead to how it could be adapted at that stage for TV or film?
I just want to say, I think because I started writing screenplays, I think I write cinematically, meaning when a scene in a book feels like it could be in a movie. Yeah, I think I write that way just because of that. So I don't think I'm thinking about that, even though that would be great. See, Kayla, I have no problem with I'm like, do whatever you want. I don't care. Just like, because you know why I say that too? Because you always have this. This is mine. And, you can't really control those other things. But I think just the idea of, I think a lot of us think in movies, or, see our stories in movies to begin with a little bit. Does that make sense?
It depends. I hadn't in the past, but actually with Ghosted, my latest novel, I saw it all unfold and could see it very easily. Probably because it's based on A Christmas Carol, which was many movies, which I watched while I was researching it. But.
Those of you that are writers, I don't know if you drive your husband or your spouse crazy. I know that I drive my husband crazy for a lot of different reasons. But one of them is that as a writer, you pick up props. You know, like you understand, you see when you're watching movies and stuff, you see props and you know, okay, that's going to be significant later, or you can kind of see ahead to what's going to happen with the character and things like that. So I always spoil things, right? Like, oh God, that's going to happen and blah, blah, blah. But I think that's part of being a writer. Like you see it because when, as a writer, you're mapping out all those things. So when you see other people do it, you're mapping out too. So I love it when I watch movies or TV or whatever, or even read books, and they get me. You know, there's a twist or something that I didn't expect. I always love that because I feel like we see it. We see that because we see the movie. We can see steps ahead. Any of you want to respond to that? Do you see a movie in your head?
I mean, so I went to screenwriting school, and in playwriting you have 1 act, 2 acts, 3 acts, 4 acts. I mean, it got a lot of acts in plays. But in film you have 3 acts, and that's what I studied. And every time I write a book, I map it out in 3-act structure, and I very strictly adhere to it, and it has mostly done me well, I think.
I've had reviewers pipe in and say that word cinematic, and I get it because it's, yes, especially if you come from that business, it's kind of in your bones that you write cinematically, so that it can translate to episodic. You know, you can go into television. You know, so I think over the years you kind of get a feel for when to move off of something and when to get onto something else, and it feels that way for me. Probably what I've learned, not with the scenes that are heavy in dialogue, but with a description in a book, that I can do a lot less. And that's what I rely on the publisher to tell me. Like, okay, that is a half a page, not 3 battle scenes. That could be 1, you know. But I guess it's just in my DNA right now that it is. I write in a cinematic way.
Sure. So the last question, we have about 4 minutes left. So for the last question, I'd like for each of you to tell us what your next project is. So Dana?
I'm working on a book that I'm in revisions for right now, which is called Jewel.
And tell us about Jewel. I assume it's not about the singer.
No, it's not about the singer. It's about a girl with a particular issue that that I'm not quite ready to talk about yet. But it's high concept in that way. It's a particular thing that, you know, she has to deal with. You know, when we don't feel normal, what happens? And so anyway,
okay,
that's it.
I have a few projects. I think I'm adapting Ghosted, writing a spec script for the first time. And I'm working on an adult murder mystery and also another kids mystery set in Los Angeles.
Great. At the CSLA conference?
Possibly.
Ooh. Scott, what's your next project?
Well, I'm just sort of busy with my day job now at Nickelodeon. I'm working on a show. I said
The Slime Show?
No, it's not the Slime Show. Not the Slime Show, but it's almost as good as the Slime Show. It almost tops that.
You can't do that on television.
Yes, that was that. That was yeah. That's right. Yeah. But this one's called Wonder Park, and it's actually based on a movie that's coming out in March from Paramount. So please all go see the movie so that we can get more episodes of the show. Yeah, it does look. It looks really good.
So your name will be in the credits, and we can be like, we know him.
Well, not of the movie. This is the TV show based on the movie, but of the TV show, sure, yes. But if you all go see the movie, then we will. It'll help us. You out there too, and on the camera. It will help us get more episodes of the show as it moves forward. And my boss told me to say that. So hi Todd.
Yeah, well, I'm wrapping up my debut right now, which is The Remarkable Inventions of Walter Mortensen, which I said earlier. Check it out. And it's a fantasy adventure story in the vein of sort of what I loved about Roald Dahl and Tim Burton and Neil Gaiman, that it's just sort of this slightly macabre but very whimsical journey about a kid who's an inventor prodigy who wants to find out the truth about why his father died. So he travels across this really magical, like, patchwork of landscapes in order to uncover that mystery. And that's fun. And then at my day job, I produce web comics at Line Webtoons. So if any of you like comics or you have kids that like comics, you should check that out because we're working on some really cool ones.
Great. Thank you, Eric. And what's your next project?
A book called Tagged. I'm in the middle of it right now. Hopefully it'll come out next year. It's 3 separate stories, 3 separate young people, heroes, 2 boys and a girl. One goes back to the Civil War, another goes back to the Cold War, and then the third one goes to about 25 years earlier. Earth is in need of a tune-up. We're a little bit off right now, and so they are sent back in time to solve tremendous tasks, and then they are brought forward back into the present. They take on a whole nother reality when they're back there, back into the present to then be catapulted into the future to solve a bigger problem.
Great. Thank you.
So we got a little bit of historical fiction and time travel sci-fi stuff going on.
Fabulous.
So we'll see.
All right, so great. That is our time. Thank you so much for being here.